Hi everyone! So the unthinkable has happened and I have actually managed to get 2 videos up of the 3 that I am planning to do this week. Will I get tomorrow's up? Who knows, but wish me luck. Today we've got a couple of shout outs yet again from my media class. I'm sure you're actually meant to be doing something and learning something, but I'm going to take the subscribers anyway. So big shout out to Freya and also to Cooper Mods. Today we're going to be having a look at the Man with the Golden Gun trailer. Again, this is not something that you have to know for your GCSEs. This is not something that is going to come up on the paper, but it is something that's useful to practice your analysis of camera shots, to practice your analysis of sort of still images, moving images, and also to practice those key terms as well. So it's a really useful revision technique. This is a much longer trailer, so probably it's going to be a much longer video, but we'll see. Just bear with me as we go through it together. So we start off with the first frame, and the producers are mentioned here, as we can see Harry Saltzman and Albert R. Broccoli, who's a very famous producer and director of films. They're mentioned as credits, obviously, to give them some sort of credit for whatever it is that they've made, which we would expect to find on the credit block within a poster as well. Now we also have this distorted image of a gun in the background. We can tell that it's golden, so we've got anchorage towards the title of the movie, but it also has a very slow pan that moves towards us as an audience. We then get this signature part of James Bond movies where we have this circle transition that's designed to represent the barrel of a gun, and this is something that is conventional to the franchise, particularly as we can see in the next shot when Bond shoots towards the camera. Now as he does so, the name of the actor playing Bond appears as a USP for the film, and we also have a golden gun directed to the right hand side, which again anchors the image to the title of the film. As Bond moves slowly towards the camera, he moves from an extreme long shot to a mid shot, then a close-up, before the scene itself transitions to sort of move backward and reveal key aspects of the film. And we begin the aspects of the film by looking at the setting, which suggests a high level of formality because of the sort of wooden panelling that we've got in the background and the man who's dressed in a suit. Now this is something we would expect to find of the upper class, and therefore something that we would expect to find of Bond, particularly given that everything's that's going on in this frame here. We then have a close-up on the bullet, which is significant because it's golden like the title, but it's also got Bond's alias 007 scratched into it, and this suggests danger. We then have enigma created because we can see this eye gazing down, probably not the barrel but the sort of eyesight of the gun, and we can infer from this that this is Bond's antagonist. It's the villain, the guy who he's meant to be catching, but we don't yet know who they are. Now given this enigma and this danger that we see in the middle shot, we then have Bond looking kind of vulnerable from his facial expressions on the right hand side, particularly when we add in that bird's eye view shot that makes him seem smaller. This connotes fear, and that's something that we wouldn't necessarily expect as an audience. We then have more characters that are introduced, but we don't necessarily get to know them or their names, and this adds further mystery and suspense and encourages us to go and watch the film, because although this is a longer trailer, they don't want to give everything away to us. They still want to make money, and they still want people to go out and watch the film. Now these 3 shots are kind of interesting because the middle shot, Bond seems very calm, collected, something that we'd expect from him, but there's a link between that frame and then the one on the right hand side because it appears as if Bond has shot the man. Now we know that this might not be the case because, as we all know from trailers, the trailer is made by editing together different clips from the film. So again, this might mean that we get surprises when we go into the cinema and actually watch the production. Now initially we would expect Bond and a woman together to be part of the romance subplot. This is a very common trope because Bond normally gets the girl by the end of the narrative, but the fact that he's attacking her, as we can see in that middle frame, subverts our expectation and creates this sense of enigma because we wonder why he's attacking her and why this is the case. Now his facial expressions here are very serious, and this is something that we would associate with the action genre because normally there's more serious narratives and storylines happening. We then move to see Thai dancers who are representative of the different settings featured within the film. We also have gold and very jewelled dress codes, which again connote this very high level of wealth that we would normally associate with James Bond. Interestingly though, he's the only white man that we can see at the poker table. Now at the time this wouldn't have been unusual to see this sort of staging within films, but to a modern audience this would seem really unusual and strange and wouldn't really fit in with the sort of expectations that we have socially today. We also are introduced to a woman who's more high class and more put together, and this might suggest that she's a Bond girl or perhaps is part of that particular character trope. Now Bond follows her out of the casino, and this again provides further enigma because we're unaware whether or not this is a reference to the action narrative and the main storyline, or whether this is going to be part of the romance subplot that then becomes important later on. And we have this quick cut then from the casino to this boat scene, which again suggests further action because the boat's pretty much moving at a very quick speed, but it's also something that we would associate with Bond's career because we know that he's going to be travelling and he's going to be going to places that perhaps at this point the audience hadn't necessarily travelled to. We then have another extreme close-up, which here is on the belly button, and again this sexualises a woman, mostly because we don't see her face, but it's also an indication of wealth because the jewel here is the focus. And we can see that as the camera zooms out, that Bond is really fully engaged with this belly dancer, and this sort of illustrates a significant part of his character, particularly to a modern demographic, because we would view him today as a womanizer, and that certainly was the case back in 1970s when this was produced, but there was less of an emphasis on how many women Bond had got together with, and now it's very much more sort of a focus, and that's got to be something that's taken into consideration. We then have a wide shot emphasising the setting. We've got a lot of low-key lighting and reds here, which again suggests something very dark, potentially dangerous, and act as a warning. Before having a sort of over-the-shoulder shot, it sort of places the demographic, or us, in the position of one of the people sitting at the bar at one of the tables, so it makes us feel like we're involved and like we're actually there. Now at this point, other actresses' names are included to act as a draw towards the film, and we do see that romance subplot very clearly through the compromising position that Bond and the lady are positioned in. But it's kind of interesting that we have one actress followed by another, which again suggests that Bond is a womanizer and that this is something that was okay in the 1970s. Particularly when we then see the towel falling to the floor, which sexualises the woman even more, because for the audience we don't get to know which one of the women it is who dropped this towel, whether it's a completely different woman altogether. So because we don't see her face, we then remove her identity and completely sexualise and objectify her. Now we then have more evidence of stereotyping, this time cultural, through the dress codes that people are wearing and through the kung fu scenes that we can see in the centre shot here. Now at this point, it was very indicative of the time. People were really finding kung fu and martial arts more interesting, and so by including that in the film, it obviously acts as an extra incentive and an extra draw to the production as a whole. And we do see Bond showing respect, again something that we would associate with his career. He needs to know the customs and he needs to know the sort of expectations of the different countries that he's in. But interestingly, we have binary opposition with the person that he's facing because we've got black and white, again suggesting perhaps good and evil. And this is further reinforced when we see Bond get snubbed by that rival fighter. Now the fight scene is a convention of the action genre, even though it's happening in a martial arts style here. And something else that we would expect to see, and that we did see in the Spectre trailer, is Bond diving through the window. So this provides an iconic image that really illustrates the genre and raises tension and suspense because we don't know whether Bond is going to make it. Now, placing Bond into positions of peril is something that we would anticipate, and that's something that occurs throughout the whole franchise, particularly here as Bond looks outnumbered. But what we don't expect is for the two schoolgirls to step in and to fight instead of Bond. So this suggests that not only are they powerful and strong, but it also shows a more feminist perspective. Now we get repeated transitions which are seen through, again, the gun barrel image here, and this is a common convention for longer trailers to repeat particular transitions or frames, as you're going to see later on. Now as the camera zooms out, there's an indication of Bond's antagonist. He also appears high class through his dress codes. We've got suit and tie, and we see his sidekick in the car, Knick-Knack, who has connotations of evil because even from here we can see that he's wearing a lot of black. Now when we do see Bond, he appears to have arrived far too late, and again this is another convention of action films and of Bond films, that we suddenly have a damsel in distress who needs saving, and Bond begins to fulfil that convention. The fact that we have a character who's described as being back in the centre frame also suggests that he's a fan favourite, and this is someone who the audience are probably going to want to see again. So we're sort of referencing previous films here, and this again adds a draw to a film because people who particularly liked the film that had Sheriff Pepper in it are likely to watch this one as well. Destruction can be seen through the final scene, which again is something that's evident in the franchise as a whole, and we definitely saw that with Inspector. As with many Bond films though, product placement is a key part of marketing and a part of synergy, then we can see that through the emphasis on the cars and the models that are being used. We also have a car chase again, which is something that's a very common convention. Tension and suspense is increased because the cars appear to be moving towards us as a demographic, and we also expect to see stunts, which we can see through that final frame with the car. And we get this sort of evidence of foreshadowing. We know it's going to crash, we know it's going to cause problems, we know it's going to cause chaos, and so we sort of get that expected convention there. Now initially it appears as if the bad guys have won because we've got a long shot emphasising a very calm setting and isolation of the car as a whole, and the mocking gesture that Nick Nack gives to the camera also connotes this sense of confidence because the antagonists here believe that they've won. We can see a smirk on the other man's face as well, and this is reinforced by Bond and his companion, who seem to have this sort of concerned, disbelieving sort of stare on their face. And this again creates more suspense and mystery, enigma, because we wonder what has happened to cause this look. And we finally realise that in the next frame where we see that the car is now flying. This creates a moment of comic relief where the audience sort of laugh to break the tension, but it also represents the gadgets that we would expect to find within Bond films. Now, as with the previous shot of Bond with a telephone or walkie-talkie, we now sort of get this idea of it making sense because the demographic understand who he's been talking to, but the peril that this lady is in becomes apparent when we see that very high angle bird's eye view shot that emphasises how high up she is, particularly given the angle that the car was at when it was taking off. In contrast, we then get this low angle shot, which makes the car and obviously Bond, who's in it, seem more powerful. We also get this element of foreshadowing when we see the ramp because we know what's going to happen. And actually the shot of the car going up the ramp and off the ramp, as we can see in that final frame, is something that's included on the poster. Now the fact that it's included in the trailer and the poster indicates that this is going to be quite an important part of the film and perhaps something that's going to draw the audience in further. Now we have again that repeated transition which reinforces the title. It also echoes the idea and anchors the idea that there is a gun involved here, as we see in the title. Planes again, very common for Bond due to his career, also the high wealth that he possesses. And following the previous shots, we can infer that he's after the girl because he's trying to rescue or save her. And again, this is a common convention of both the film and the franchise as a whole. Now, as he lands the plane on the beach, we do have some sort of throwbacks to other Bond films, but it's also something that indicates a tropical area, which again would be something that the audience might be interested in, as perhaps they've not had the opportunity to visit a place like that themselves. We get Nick Nack again, but here he seems less evil, which again provides juxtaposition with how he's been seen previously. We get a high angle shot which emphasises his size and acts as a stereotype, while the bottle of champagne indicates his level of wealth and Bond's level of wealth as well. Now when we get the title screen at the end of the film, we've also got it echoed at the beginning, and this would be something that's expected again of longer trailers, but having a title screen at the end is something that we would expect of all trailers. Another shot that's repeated is the eye looking down the gun, and again this clearly represents Bond's antagonist, but we've also got enigma and suspense created here, particularly when we cut to this shot of Bond who's shown in red lighting, which acts as danger and warning, whereas the villain, as we might see in Props Theory, is shrouded in something that makes him seem much, much harder to get. Finally, we get the name of him revealed as Scaramanga. There's also a very high profile actor included in the performance, which again would provide incentives. So not only have we got fans of James Bond as a whole, but we've got fans of Christopher Lee and we've got fans of Roger Moore joining this demographic. So we increase by the amount of actors, of well-known actors that we have. Now, placing the shot of Bond and Scaramanga side by side emphasises this binary opposition between the two, and we have repeated reflections of Bond in the background to create enigma and confusion. As Scaramanga leaves, we're left questioning whether or not he'll be caught, and as this is coming to the end of the trailer, it acts as a final draw. It acts as a final draw to the film. The villainous character of Scaramanga can be seen through the low-angle shot. It makes him seem more powerful and dominant, while the woman in the middle appears to be more powerful given that she's higher up than the man, and this again subverts expectation by making her seem more dominant. Now, also included on the poster is the explosion at the power plant, and again it's playing on fears that over the energy crisis that were happening at the time, which again would make people more interested in watching to see what the likely outcome of that would be, perhaps to give them an idea of what might happen in real life. Now, as Bond fulfills the stereotype of white knight by rescuing the female, the demographic are left wondering whether or not they'll make it out of this alive. And in the extreme high angle long shot, we get this idea that there's very slim chance they're going to make it out alive because they seem so small and so vulnerable in comparison to everything else. Now, explosions are a common convention of the action genre and the Bond franchise as a whole. We also credit Ian Fleming, who's the original author of the Bond franchise, and again that would draw in another audience as well. And we finally end with the title screen. Again, that mirrors what we've seen before, so it's a repeated frame, but there's no release date here. And we also have production credits, again included as a convention of trailers, but again there's no release date as we would expect to see with a modern trailer. Sorry that's taken so long. As you can see, there were loads of key terms for us to go through, and in fact I noticed some that I hadn't even highlighted as we were going through this video. So perhaps what you guys want to do is for revision is to go back through the video, try and spot the one spelling mistake that I've made, and also try and spot where those key terms were that I didn't highlight. Alternatively, have a go at doing this yourself. Pick a trailer, pick a perhaps a advert and break it down, start practicing your key terms, start practicing your camera shots. This is something that you guys can be doing to keep up to date with your media knowledge. If you haven't done so already and you would like a shout out in the next video, please subscribe, hit the button below and you'll get a shout out in the next video. You can also post comments and questions down below in the comment section. I do my best to get back to everybody. Or you can get in touch with me through Twitter at media_revision and also through Instagram at GCSE Media Revision. My Instagram is also including bits that I do in revision at school and also little bits that I do for English, as well as that is the second subject that I teach. So it's going to be a little bit of everything on there, whereas this is purely media based. Hopefully guys, I will see you guys tomorrow for the next and final video this week.